Hello and what is up? This is David and welcome back to the Flow program. Today is all about taking massive, smart, but massive action and really executing on our action list. And so I'm going to be showing you all the strategies that you can use to ignite and start that fire of flow. So let's get into it. So in today's lesson, we are going to be covering these techniques and strategies and concepts here. So we're going to be going over taking massive action once again, the Pomodoro technique, our flow hours, logical and creative flow, what I like to call the figure 8 method, and our muse versus our resistance. So let's talk about taking action, okay? So how do we take that first step of flow? How do we first ignite that engine to our mind, all right? And the big key here is to only think about that first step, to think about everything one step at a time. And I will give you some strategies on how you can use this. So today is all about action. So if you really think about what action is a physical thing. That's all that it is. And so when we start to tackle our projects or something big that we have to do, try not to think about it as a mental energy kind of thing. Try not to think about all the mental RAM that's required to really accomplish the task, but rather think of it as a physical action. So what does that mean? I'll give you some examples. So how do you put on your shoes? Right? It's a weird question, but how do you put it on? How do you put on your shoes? Well, you just go up to your shoes, you put in your feet, and then you tie your shoes, right? There's not much thinking that goes on because we associate putting on our shoes with a physical thing. It's a physical act, right? So that's the way we want to apply to our action items and our execution items and our one thing. And I'll give you another example to make more sense of this. It's like, how do you turn on the TV? Well, you just push a freaking button on the remote controller, right? And so think of it like this. So how do we write? How do we do something on our computer? Well, you just push freaking buttons on your laptop or your keyboard. And so you really want to start off by thinking about the physical action and not necessarily everything else that goes behind that. Because if you think about the entire process of writing and coming up with creative ideas, then you'll never get started. So yesterday we talked about the gateway action, right? So it's kind of like the same concept. You want to think about your gateway action as a physical thing and something that doesn't really consume a lot of mental energy. So really think about that first step. Just think about putting on your shoes. How do you put on your shoes? Well, you just go up to your shoes and you put it on. How do you write? Well, just go up to your computer and you start pushing some buttons. Okay, so really think about it as a physical act. And yeah, so it's like that first physical step to get you into momentum and to get you into flow. And you want to take action so fast that it overwhelms the thinking mind. Take action so fast and take so much action that it overwhelms the excuse-making mind. And we are all geniuses when it comes to excuse making. Like, we will come up with the most elaborate and most creative excuses in the world not to take action, right? We have PhD degrees in excuse making. And only if we could take that creative genius inside of us, and instead of making excuses, we can use that for our craft. So, in order for us to outsmart our mind, we have to take so much action so quickly that it doesn't have time for it to make and come up with excuses. Okay, so we are outsmarting our mind. And I can give you a little example of this. So I used to have this big fear of public speaking, and actually I had problems communicating in a verbal format, right? Speaking out loud and communicating that way. And I still do to some degree to this day, because I still do stumble on my words, right? So it was one of my weaknesses, and I am still improving to this day, right? And so I had this big fear of public speaking, and so I decided to overcome this fear by joining a public speaking club. And how I outsmarted my excuse-making mind was, whenever they asked for a volunteer, I would raise my hand so fast that I didn't give my mind a chance to come up with an excuse. And so I would raise my hand no matter what, and by that time, it's already too late, right? They saw my hand, and they would they would call on my name to come forward to speak in front of the crowd. And so you want to take so much action and not think about it, okay? Because overthinking creates procrastination. All that procrastination is really overthinking things. And you want to take so much action and you want to calibrate after the fact. Calibrate after the fact. So after you take action, and then your brain will finally catch up, right? And then instead of you taking that energy, taking that same mental energy and creative energy into excuse making, your brain will now allocate that energy into adjusting with the current situation. Say, for example, you raise your hand in class to volunteer to speak in front of the crowd, right? And so you raise your hand so fast and you don't give time for your brain to make excuses. And now, instead of taking that same energy that your brain would use in excuse making, it is now using that energy and reallocating it to, speaking in front of people. Okay, so it's using that same energy, but in a better way. It's using that same energy, but to direct it into the path of action rather than the path of excuse. So think of it like that. Okay, so you want to calibrate after the fact. Take so much action that it overcomes the excuse-making mind. We want to outsmart our mind here. And just go. No matter what, just start writing. Just push some buttons on your keyboard. Just go out there to the gym. Just take that first step. Think about the physical action and not everything else that comes after it. So let me give you a little example on quantity versus quality. So there was a teacher of a photography class. And what this teacher, what he did was he decided to split the class into two halves. And the first half of the group he called the quantity group. And he would want these students to turn in as much photography as possible. And then at the end of the term, he would give them a grade on the quality of work that they would produce, right? And the other half of the class he called the quality group. And for this half, he would assign them just one picture. Okay, so they had to take the perfect picture. And by the end of the term, they would turn in this perfect picture and he would give them a grade depending on how well they did with this one picture. And as it turns out, the quantity group, they always produced better pictures at the end of the term than the quality group. And so the moral of this story was doing the action over and over again makes you become better at that skill, which increases your quality rather than being stagnant at it and just aiming for perfection and just focusing on quality, because quantity over time becomes quality, because it's the amount of repetition that you put into a craft that you then become better at it, and then it slowly starts to become this great piece of work, and it slowly starts to become quality. All right, so taking action, it's not just a mindless piece of strategy. There's actually a reason for this, because we want to take so much action that we slowly start to get better and better at it. We slowly every day start to get better and better at our writing, instead of having that aim for perfection to stagnate us. We are actually going into growth and choosing progression over protection and over barriers. All right, so we really want to take action as quickly as possible. So don't focus on quality, just go. Pretend it's your first ugly draft. Say these video lessons, right? I pretend like it's my first ugly draft. I pretend, okay, this is not going to be posted up. This is just a practice run. And I'm just going to hit record and, this is just going to be a practice run. And so I go in with that mindset, and you know what ends up happening? I ended up and usually end up posting it because I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty good. And so it's with that mindset, with that act of doing things over and over again, that quantity which produces the quality. So pretend it's your ugly first draft and just start writing. So this is a very beautiful quote from Steven Pressfield. He says, "Remember, there is a huge difference between the art you make and the art you share." So pretend you're not sharing this with anybody. You're just here to make art. You're just here to get better at your craft. All right, you don't got to share it. And over time, the quantity of work that you do from the massive amounts of work that you do, you can choose out of those many amounts of work that you do, out of the many quantities, you can choose the ones that you feel like has quality, and then you can choose to share that work. So choose quantity over quality. And so here is a quote that really inspires me. So it's by a great writer, and he has produced tons of writing and tons of work in his life. And so he says, well, when I write, I feel like an armless, legless man with a crayon in his mouth. So we all go through struggles and we all go through resistance, okay? So the difference between an amateur and that professional is that the professional, even though there is resistance in the way, he still acts on it. He still takes action every single day. So you want to be taking and creating action every single day, no matter what, all right? Okay, so I'll give some examples of how we can take action and how we can take quick action. So let's say in writing, just write 2 ugly gibberish sentences. Smash some buttons on the keyboard. In lyrics, just write 2 ugly lines of lyrics. You just gotta move pen to paper. That's all you've got to do, all right? And in music, just write 1 bar of crappy music. Again, think about the physical process of just pushing buttons on the piano. And Rick Rubin, the great music producer, he actually has a strategy on helping his artists overcome their procrastination. So he would ask his artists to just give him 2 words of a lyric, or just like 2 words of a line, right? And so that in and of itself becomes a quick little action that they can do. You know, they're not really thinking about writing the entire song, but they're just thinking about 1 footstep at a time, which is just 2 words at a time. Let's tackle this problem 2 words at a time. And that usually helps the artists overcome their procrastination, because they think to themselves, oh, it's only 2 words. I can give him 2 words of a line. That's so easy. So you just want to take it 1 footstep at a time. And in social interactions, this is a great example. Say you have a moment where you want to meet a special person out there in the real world, and say it's usually the opposite sex, right? Say you're attracted to a person and you want to introduce yourself to this person. Well, what you can do is just say hi, right? Take so much action that it overwhelms the excuse-making mind. And think of it as a physical action. Wave hand, move lips. Calibrate after the fact. Think about what you're going to say after you say hi. Because if you don't say hi now, you're going to miss the chance. And who knows, that person might have been your soulmate. So just go up there and introduce yourself and say hi. Your mind will come up with things to say after the fact, after you have taken action. You want to use the energy of excuse making and redirect it into the conversation, into thinking about what to say, rather than using that energy for excuse making. Okay, so just go up there and say hi. And you want to act at the speed of courage. That's what this lesson is all about. The speed of courage, and to take that flow, to ride that wave for as long as possible. It's just to ignite. The first spark is the hardest, but after that fire gets lit up, and then it's just downhill from then on. All right, so let's just take that first step. That's all we got to think about and focus on. All right, so let's talk about now the Pomodoro technique. And this is the Pomodoro Entry concept. And the Pomodoro is a very, I would say, popular technique used throughout the world, and it's usually used in studying and learning, right? So the Pomodoro technique, and Pomodoro means tomato in Italian, I think it was first noted by Francisco Cirillo. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but it was in the 1980s. And he would notice that whenever he studied in 25-minute bursts, and he would have like a kitchen counter, and I think the word Pomodoro comes from his kitchen timer, which was in the shape of a tomato. He would set a 25-minute timer every time he would start to study. And he would study intensely for that 25 minutes, and then he would take a 5-minute break, and then he would set the timer again, and then he would do another 25-minute burst of studying, and then he would take another 5-minute break, and then the cycle would repeat. He noticed that this would be so much more effective rather than just a big stretch of studying period for about, like 3 or 4 hours. And so the original technique goes something like this. So step number 1 is decide a task to complete. 2, set a mechanical timer to 25 minutes. 3, work on task until timer goes off. 4, when timer goes off, put check mark on piece of paper. 5, take a 3 to 5 minute break. 6, every 25-minute interval is called a set. And step 7, every set, take a longer break for 15 to 30 minutes. And step number 8, repeat the cycle over and over until the task is complete. So this is the original way, but I have made a custom way so that we can use our flow calendar and use this as an entryway into our flow state. So here's a picture of what that tomato timer kind of looks like. And let me just give you the science behind the Pomodoro technique, by the way. This has been researched. So there was a study done at the University of Michigan, and they had hundreds of students record the time that once you start studying something or learning something, they wanted them to record the time, the moment that they felt that learning was decreasing. Like what hour or what minute interval did they feel like their learning started to decrease, right? They wanted to measure this. And they collected hundreds and hundreds of data. And they found out that that moment when learning started to decrease was right around the 25-minute to 30-minute mark. And so it was straight up in alignment with the Pomodoro technique. And so after 25 minutes, they felt that their learning would decrease drastically. And so the author, Marty Lobdell, and he's the author of Study Less and Learn More, I think that's the title, but I'll leave a link to the book down below. And he gives a great example in one of his studies. And he said he had a student, a medical student, and her plan to study throughout her medical term was first of all, she was on the verge of failing, right? She had like D's throughout all her classes. And so the professor say that if she didn't raise her grade, then she would need to drop out of medical school. So her plan was, at the end of the day, to allocate 6 hours at a time to studying and to learning. And her strategy was to study for 6 hours straight without taking any breaks at all. And at the end of the term, what happened was she ended up with a 0.0 GPA. She ended up failing all of her classes by using this strategy. And her learning curve went something like this, right? It's in alignment with the research that we talked about before, right? Like the learning decreased drastically after about the first 30 minutes to an hour. And by the end of a few hours, she had like no learning at all because all of her mental energy has been depleted. And instead, what she could have done was to use the Pomodoro technique, which would have been way more effective. And if she had learned and studied this way, I think maybe she might have passed all her classes. So it would have looked something like this instead. So here are some Pomodoro bursts here. So after the learning starts to decrease, you can take a break. And what they found out was if you took a break, even just for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you return to your studying session, they found out that it is nearly 100% efficiency. So just taking that small little break is so much more effective in your learning than a longer stretch of studying. Okay, so we want to be smart about this. Remember, it's about taking smart, but also massive action. And so we want to take little breaks here and there to maximize our productivity. So it's a burst of flow, okay? So it's a lot of blitz of focuses here. So we're doing rounds and blitz of flow states. So the thing is, 25 minutes in the beginning is a good number for most people. But what you will notice is that if you've done this for a while, 25 minutes will seem like nothing. So you're kind of increasing your flow muscles. Say, for example, you start off with, like 5-pound dumbbells, but then after you've been doing that for a while, it becomes pretty damn easy to lift 5-pound dumbbells and to do a lot of reps of those. And so what you start to notice is that you can actually start to increase that length and that span of attention. And so for me now, my sweet spot is around 90 minutes at a time. And that's just my warm-up set. After that first 90 minutes, and then I'll take a little break, like a 5-minute break, and I'll come back and then I'll increase that interval to even longer. And so you want to work your way up. You can start at 25 minutes, but then slowly over time, you can increase that amount to 30 minutes, to 50 minutes, to an hour, and maybe even hours in the future. And here's a very important thing, is if you catch flow and you don't need a break, then you don't have to take a break. Even though the technique says that you should take a break, please don't take a break if you catch flow. Because a big enough break can stop flow, and you never, ever want to waste a flow state. Because flow states are very rare, especially super flow states, which I will talk about in a moment here. But these are really rare, so you do not want to ever waste a good opportunity of focus power. And I only get super flow states maybe once a week, okay? And super flow states, which I will dive deeper into in a moment, is like that flow state where nothing can waver your focus. You can do this all day long. 12, 14, even 16 hours is no problem. And so those states are really rare. And if you don't have to take a break, you don't have to take a break. If you just want to keep going, then ride that momentum all the way downhill. Milk it for as long as possible. And you can think of Pomodoro as a warm-up set. So that first 25 minutes, just think of it as a warm-up set. You don't have to keep doing 25 set intervals. You can actually increase that however amount you want. And it's kind of like we all need warm-ups. Even in exercise, we all need to stretch and do warm-up sets. So just think of it as a warm-up set, just to start that momentum going. But once you get momentum, you can definitely increase it. All right, so let me show you how you can use your flow hours on the True North calendar in tandem with this technique and this burst of flow. Okay, so let's get into the calendar. All right, so here we are on our True North calendar. And if you can see the space below the checklist here, this is a space to write down your flow hours. How many intervals you got done by using the Pomodoro technique. And if you look to the right here, these are your weekly flow hours. So it automatically calculates how many hours of flow you have gotten throughout the week. And if you look on the bottom here, it also adds up all the monthly flow hours. So you can actually keep a very accurate track of how much effort you are putting into something. And so you can actually see your progress in this calendar as you are building up those skills. So this is a great tool to use. And so what you can do is, say for example, you are starting off the day, right? What you can do is you can just go up to your egg timer, and let me just set an egg timer. So what you can do is you can just set up your egg timer first thing before you get into your action items. So in this example, I set it to 90 minutes here, and then I'll go back to the calendar and I will work on my one thing, and I will keep working on it, and I will try to work on it with as much intensity as possible, and I will try not to stop until the alarm rings. And once the alarm rings, I will put down here the amount of time I've been in flow. So for this case, I was in flow for 90 minutes. And then I would take a little break, a 5-minute break, and just walk around a little bit. And then I would come back and I would set the timer once again, and I would have another round of focus repetition and keep working on the task. And then I would keep working on it until the alarm rings again. And then once it rings again, I would add to the flow hours. And I will keep doing this until I get this checked off. And then of course, if I have more items to do, I would keep going until I get everything else checked off. And so it's a great way to keep track of your hours and how much effort you are putting into something. Okay, so please use the flow hours, and you can see a ton of progress over time, and you'll really feel really proud of yourself. Really feel that sense of accomplishment. And this flow hours, and keeping track of flow hours, is based on the 10,000 hour rule. And this was coined by K. Anders Ericsson. He's pretty much the father of the 10,000 hour rule. And so pretty much his entire life, he studied world-class performers, the best of the best at their craft, right? These would be like the world-class performers in sports, or world-class musicians, or world-class performers. And the common denominator that he found out throughout all of these world-class performers was they all had at least at a minimum 10,000 hours of practice before they got to that world-class level. And this was not just ordinary, mindless practice, right? This was deliberate practice, meaning they put mental energy into their practice sessions. And they had focus and intensity and laser-like focus into their practice sessions. And after about 10,000 hours of these practice sessions, he found that they would reach the genius level of their craft. And so that's what we are trying to keep a track of, our road to 10,000 hours. Or at least come close to the 10,000 hours, right? And so what we're trying to do here is to keep track of those hours so that we can feel ourselves getting better every single day and growing those skills more and more on a daily basis. Okay, so let me actually go back to the calendar and actually show you the micro journal. So this section right here, right? This is actually a section for a micro journal that you can fill out at the end of your work day. So it's just a small little space to put in like your feelings throughout the day, how you felt, how much flow you got. So for example, on this day, let's just say, I got a lot done. I felt great today. Or you can say I got into flow. Maybe it was the keto food that I ate. And you can also put in like your ketosis level, say for example, 2.2 ketone level. And I felt great or something like that, right? So it's just a little micro journal that you can input at the end of the day. And so you can just look back and say, okay, I got a lot done today. I felt great. And maybe you can find some correlation, say, 1.2 ketone level. Okay, I felt great. Let me try to replicate that. Let me try to get into 1.2 ketone level once again and see how that goes for my day. So it's just a little place to put in your thoughts and feelings at the end of the day. Okay, so the egg timer that we are using for the flow hours, it acts also as a micro pressure. So how you can use the egg timer is, say for example, let's set the timer for 25 minutes and try to make it like a game. Try to say, okay, let's see if I can complete my task within 25 minutes. And so it creates kind of like a micro pressure for you to ignite your flow. And not only does it act as a micro pressure, but it also acts as an hour tracker, like we've covered before, and also your break tracker. So it has multiple uses, this egg timer it does here. So here are just some variations that you can use for the egg timer. It understands 60 min or 60 minutes or 1 hour. So you can use it like this. And another reason why we are using and tracking our hours is sometimes we might not hit our goal. We might just be a little off of our deadline, right? We might make it 90% of the way. And instead of feeling like, oh God, we missed our goal, and instead of feeling down about it, we can actually feel very productive about it and feel very accomplished about it because we can see all the hours we put into our craft and all the deliberate practice hours that we put in every single day. And by tracking this, we can still feel that sense of accomplishment and the effort that we put in and not relying on the outcome. Even though we might have missed our deadline, we still were able to develop those skills every single day. Remember, it was about becoming and being that skillful person, increasing in their skill every day. That is the ultimate reward versus the doing part, versus the outcome part and the accomplishment part. So that is another reason why we are using the flow hours. So it's a multi-purpose tool, this calendar that we are using. It's like a Swiss Army knife of productivity. All right, so here is a little flow cheat sheet that you can use every single day to ignite and start that fire every day. And this is what I use, okay? So first and foremost, you want to put your phone away, put it on airplane mode and lock it away out of sight. Place it somewhere where it is really hard to reach, all right? Put as many obstacles between you and distraction as possible. And second step, take out your True North calendar and look at your action item list. Turn on your egg timer to 25 minutes, or what I like to do is 90-minute bursts. And then I like to put on some good music. And I like to put on more of upbeat music. Everybody's different, but I work better with upbeat type of music, and it has to be non-lyrical. Right? Because I feel like lyrics distract me and they distract my creativity. So some examples of music that I can give are movie music or trailer music or even video game music. Those types of music, they usually don't have any lyrics to them. And I'll leave some examples down below. But just put on some good music that will get you going and just go. just go and do not stop until that alarm rings. This is about taking massive and smart action and keep doing it until the alarm rings. Think of it as a physical thing. All right, just press some freaking buttons on your keyboard. And then after the alarm rings, input your flow hours into your hour tracker, and then take a little break and repeat that cycle until you get your tasks done. So that's how we can initiate flow. All right, the figure 8 flow method. What is this, right? So what I have experienced personally is that there is a different type of flow. And the flow that I witness when I'm in a creative mode is different from the flow that I witness when I'm in like a more logical and a more structural and more of an editing type of flow. So what do I mean? Let me try to make sense of this by giving you a little example, okay? And let me read you a quote here, and this is from Ta-Nehisi Quotes, and he is an amazing writer. He spills poetry into his writing. And the quote says, "The challenge of writing is to see your horribleness on page, to see your terribleness and then go to bed, and wake up the next day and take that horribleness and that terribleness and refine it, and make it not so terrible and not so horrible. And then to go to bed again and come the next day and refine it a little bit more and make it not so bad. And then go to bed the next day and do it again and make it maybe average. And then one more time, if you're lucky, maybe you get to good. And if you've done that, that is a success." So let me talk about the differences between creative flow and logical flow. So like I said, from my experience, it feels like there's a big difference between a creative flow and a logical flow. So for example, say I am having a very creative writing day. I'm just like writing down all of my creative thoughts and ideas that I have for writing a fiction book, right? And then when I try to go into editing that chapter that I wrote, I feel like I have to start my momentum all over again. And so it was that example that I give of Henry Ford, right? Switching from task to task kills momentum and leaks willpower energy. So it's kind of like the same thing here. When you're going from a creative task and then you're switching to a more logical and structured task, then it feels like you have to ignite the flow again. So it's kind of like disrupting the momentum of flow. So what you can do to take advantage of the two different types of flow, the creative flow and the logical flow, is to divide them into days. So just like the example of Ta-Nehisi Quotes, right? He says he writes something and then the next day he makes it a little better. He writes something, next day he makes it a little better. That's kind of what we're doing here. So on day 1, we're just in our creative mode. We're just letting go, letting our ideas spill out of us, spill out of our mind. We're focusing on quantity. And we're just writing, no editing, typos and all. It's just an outpouring of ideas. And the next day, what we can do is try to ignite our logical flow. So on day 2, it can be our second less ugly draft, so making it 20% better. And editing it and thinking about the structure of our sentences, making sure that it makes sense and it has a logical flow to it. So day 2 is all about quality. It's all about the editing, making it a little bit better every single day. And so the second day, after the first 2 ugly gibberish sentences on the first day, is to edit and make the sentence into more of a semi-ugly and okay sounding sentences. And so it's the back and forth between the creative and the editing, the dance between the two as you weave in and out of these 2 different states here. And it can look something like this, right? Day 1, create. Day 2, edit. Day 3, create. Day 4, edit. Day 5, create. Day 6, create and edit. What is that? Well, that's what I like to call superflow, and I'll get into that in just a bit. But you can also break figure 8 into something like this. So if you don't want to go from day to day, you can organize it within halves. So the first half of the day, let me take advantage of my creative flow and just create. And the second half of the day, let me take advantage of my logical flow and just edit and make sure I get quality out of my creativity during the first half. Or you can also do it vice versa, right? So if you feel like you want to edit your creation, then you can do that first thing in the morning. And then the second half, you can start to create. So I feel like, again, it takes 2 different types of momentums, 2 different types of flow states here. And yeah, so I feel like switching from creative flow to logical flow is like a completely different task. It's like starting momentum over again. And now let's talk about Superflow, right? And I believe, from my experience, this is just me, but I feel like there are different levels of flow. There are different degrees of flow. And so what Superflow is, it's like the ultimate state of flow. It's when you can tap into that creative flow and you can become the logical flow at the same time. It doesn't matter. It's both of those weaved together. And during these states, you get your work done no matter what. You have that mentality, like I am going to get this thing done today, no matter what, right? And that is I like to call it as superflow. It's just that I'm going to get this done no matter what type of mentality, and everything just feels so effortless. And hours and hours and hours will go by, feel like 30 minutes has passed by, right? So I like to call these states superflow. And it doesn't matter whether it's a creative task or it's a logical task. Like you can switch back and forth between the two and it won't matter because you're just like locked in. It's completely unwavering. And so that is what I like to call superflow. And so on these days, I will not let go of it. Like I will milk out this flow state for as long as possible. If that means working 18-hour days, then I will work 18-hour days. Because I feel like on these days, I can put out like a week's worth of work in one day, right? So I really do not let go of these superflow states. And like I said, I feel like there are different degrees of flow. So I like to see it as like, there's like everyday ripple flows, there's like regular flows, and then there's superflow. So everyday ripple flows are like, it's hard in the beginning. And I just got to take that first step, taking it one step at a time, and then eventually I'll hit a little flow state. And then regular flows are like, oh, right, I feel like doing some work today. Let's get stuff done. And those will last anywhere from, like 5 to 8 hours, something like that. And super flows, the entire day. Entire day, and it'll be no problem at all. In fact, sometimes I don't even want to go to sleep because I am just like so caught up and so engaged into the moment, into my work and my craft. And I see it as riding a wave. So pretend like it's a surfer catching flow states instead of catching waves. So like the first level is like the small little ripples of waves that you can catch, but it's not that fun of a ride. And then the next level are those surfable waves, like the waves that you can actually enjoy a little bit. And the last one is a gigantic outpouring wave of ideas, the once a week or twice a week type of waves where you just ride on that wave with full agility and creativity, and you just express yourself and you milk that wave for as long as possible. That is superflow or super wave in this case. And so you want to take advantage of those superflow moments, and you also want to take advantage of flow moments, and you can also initiate flow by taking one footstep at a time, right? Just doing one thing at a time and thinking about the physical action and not the overwhelming work that goes behind it. So try to catch those waves every single day. So here are your action items for today. All right, first one is just go. Just use this ignition strategy, track your flow hours, and you can use that flow cheat sheet that I gave you up on top. And I'll also leave a link to that down below. And no social media. Okay, let me first go over the first action item. So just go. Just 25-minute blitz at a time. Intense blitz, and just say it to yourself, I've only got to do this 25 minutes. Just this 25 minutes, and then I can take a break. All right, so just take it 25 minutes at a time. And if you do it that way, it doesn't seem hard at all. And then you'll look back and you'll see all the footsteps that you have taken, and you'll be amazed at how far you've come just by taking it 25 minutes at a time. And my mindset when I'm doing this, when I'm in those or initiating flow, is just give me 30 minutes of flow and I will move the world. So I'm really putting intensity into these hours. So go at it with that mindset. All right, action item number 2. No social media in the morning or during flow hours, especially in flow hours. And you don't want to use social media in the morning because it saps you of your willpower. All right, and I will be discussing willpower tomorrow, but please do not take a look at social media or during your flow hours. Instead, take a look at it at night, and you can use it as kind of like a reward for your accomplishments after you have completed your task. Okay, so no social media in the morning or during flow hours. And it says that the average person checks their phone 150 times a day, which is crazy. And this average will probably skyrocket within a few years. But we want to get this average down to 10. 10, that's so easy. Just don't check it in the morning or during flow hours. And you can maybe check it at night if you want. And if you do that, mathematically, you have 15 times more productivity. And I don't think this is an exact science, but you'll at least be a couple times more productive than if you were checking your phone 150 times a day, right? So it gets this average down to about 10 times a day. So put it on airplane mode, out of sight, and put obstacles in the way of distraction. And here's a little quote from Yuval Noah Harari, and he's the author of Sapiens and Homo Deus, incredible books. You can check those books out if you are an overachiever and if you are a lifelong learner, because those books have nothing to do with flow states, but there are amazing books. Check them out. They are seriously eye-opening books. But I'll leave a link to those in the resources down below. But he says, in ancient times, having power meant having access to data. Today, having power means knowing what to ignore. So if you know what to ignore, if you're not doing distraction, you are doing the inverse of that, which is focus. If you're not being distracted, you are in a state of mindfulness. And mindfulness is the state of flow. All right, so put away your social media. Okay, action item number 3. Continue fasting. Okay, so you want to be skipping breakfast every day. And you can have coffee or tea, but just keep it at 0 calories. And there are a ton of health benefits and also mental benefits to fasting. And we will cover this extensively in the fasting lesson, which is coming up very, very soon. And if you really want to take a look at that, you can also fast forward to that lesson and take a look at why fasting is so good for us and our productivity. And every single day and throughout the rest of the 6 weeks, your main action item, actually, which should come before everything else, is always to do your one thing, to continue your one thing and do it every single day. Okay, so that is your third action item. And I haven't talked about this yet, but this is not an action item, but this is another concept. And so I want to talk about your muse. So this is a Steven Pressfield concept. And he describes this battle between the muse and the resistance. Your muse is that creative insight. It is that magical, that spiritual, the ideas of creativity that just floods your mind. And the muse takes over and you create like these beautiful creations. Whereas the resistance, that is procrastination. That is the obstacle in the way of you and action. And this is a quote from Steven Pressfield, and he says, it's not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write, right? So we're focusing on getting that first step, just getting ourselves to sit down to write, that first action step. And he says that we don't just put off our lives today, we put them off to our deathbed. Never forget, this very moment can change our lives. There never was a moment, and never will be, when we are without the power to alter our destiny. In this second, we can turn the tables on resistance. So every moment of every day, break down that resistance. Fight it. Become a creator and light up your muse and take action every single day. All it takes is just one footstep at a time. That's really all that it takes. And you accumulate those footsteps, and over time, you have a beautiful creation that you will be so proud of. You'll be so excited about. It'll fill your life with joy. So in that dance and in that battle between your muse and your resistance, always let your muse win. Always be taking massive action, my friend. And that is it for this lesson. I hope you have learned a lot, and I hope you take massive action. Don't let go of that muse. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.